Everyone, and welcome to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers open house for the Tangipahoa Parish, Louisiana Feasibility Study. The purpose of this study is to try to reduce flooding caused by heavy rainfall events in Tangipahoa Parish. And the purpose of this open house is to try to gather input from the public on areas in the parish that might be prone to flooding. So your feedback is very important to help the Corps decide, what possible actions they may be able to take to help reduce flooding in the area. So those of you watching via Facebook Live, if you would mind leaving comments or any questions you may have in the comments section. And those of you here in person, you're more than welcome to speak to our subject matter experts anytime about the study after their presentation. Thank you for being here, and thank you for watching.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Brandon Schneider. I'm with the Army Corps of Engineers. I'm the project manager on this study. I'm going to kind of kick things off for us tonight with the presentation. Going to start a little bit here with the introductions. So as Ryan said, the Army Corps of Engineers, we've got staff here. Most of you have already talked to some of us over here, but once we wrap up the presentation, we're going to stick around in case you have anything else you want to talk about. We do have our sponsor on this project here today, so the Coastal Protection Restoration Authority Board. And then if anybody else wants to be recognized at this time, we'll just take a second here to see if anybody else wants to be recognized. All right, let's hop in and have some fun. So Ryan had kind of hinted at what we're going to walk through tonight, so I'm going to reiterate what the purpose of tonight's meeting's about. Then we're going to hop into the study overviews with what our authority is to conduct this work, go through how we're working on coordination, the schedule of the study, and then I'm going to hand it over to our study manager, our plan formulator, Katie Fector, to wrap up the presentation. So tonight, it's a twofold meeting. This is the kickoff meeting for us, for the study with the public, to let you know that we're going to be looking at flood risk management throughout the parish. And then we're also looking to get feedback from everybody. So we have some information on the parish, but we really like to hear from the public of specific issues that you may be facing within your yards. So the last sentence that you see down there about open and full public participation, I'm going to touch a little bit more on that when I bring up the schedule slide. But this isn't going to be the last time you see us down here. We're going to be hosting a few of these throughout the life of the study. So on our authority and appropriation for the Army Corps of Engineers to be able to actually complete a feasibility study, we need two different things. We need an authority from Congress, and then we actually need appropriations, i.e. funding. So in 2020, under the Water Resources Development Act is where we got our authority. Specifically for flood risk management throughout the Tangipahoa Parish. And then in 2022, under a supplemental appropriation, is when we got our funding to actually be able to start this study and move forward. Once we get the funding, there's always a bunch of stuff that has to happen before we can officially kick off like we are here. But again, I'll talk a little bit more about that once we move into the schedule. The last paragraph that you see, so you always hear about studies taking really long times or being really expensive. And so our regulations are to complete our studies within 3 years and $3 million. That sounds like a long time, but it goes by really quick. And there's a lot of analyses that go into this, a lot of modeling. A lot of the data that we get from you has to go into there as well for us to really understand the parish itself and the flood risk management issues that you're being faced with. As far as coordination, as I mentioned before, each of our projects has a sponsor on it. The sponsor on this one is the Louisiana Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority Board. But beyond that, we really reach out to a whole bunch of other stakeholders, whether they're governmental stakeholders, NGOs, non-governmental organizations. A major stakeholder on this one is the parish itself. But we are also reaching out to tribes, the State Historic Preservation Office, other resource agencies, local officials, anything along those. We gather their input into the study as well. In addition to that, even though our authority is limited directly to the Tangipahoa Parish itself, we have to look at adjacent studies and collaborate with those other studies that are going on or other construction that's happening in a neighboring parish as well. So for the schedule, so you'll see 3 stars on there. The big yellow one is where we're at right now. So in November of 2022 is when we signed what we call a feasibility cost share agreement with the sponsor. This is the start of the study. Everything can go. And then, of course, we went into the holidays, and we didn't want to try and like push public meetings or open houses like right at the holidays. So we tried to hold them afterwards, and that's where we're at right now. So the next big thing that you'll see is the alternatives milestone. This is where we've taken all this input and we've compiled measures and some alternatives of what we'd be looking at for the parish itself. Looking beyond that alternatives milestone, once we pull those together, we'll be having similar open houses as this, where we'll be conveying that same information, but now that we know more, we'll have more to present to you. That's all to lead up to the tentatively selected plan. This is kind of like this is what we think is the best option that meets the intent of the project and also in accordance with the authority and that we have for it. And so at that point in time, we'll be going back out for public reviews of our reports and hosting additional public meetings. And you're like, man, that's a lot that just happened within a year. And so this is a 3-year process. So once we get out of that tentatively selected plan, we now move into a lot more detailed modeling, a lot more detailed analysis and design that goes into it. We do a whole slew of additional reviews where we pull in other districts to review what we've done, other stakeholders, the sponsor reviews, all of those types of things. So there's a lot of things that have to happen in those last 2 years to make it to that final chief's report where we have a recommended plan at the end of the 3 years. So with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to Katie, and she's going to walk you through kind of what the actual planning process is, so like what it is to be doing the study itself.
Thanks, Brandon. Good evening. As Brandon said, my name's Katie Fechter. I work for the Corps. I'm the planner on this project, one of the planners on this project. Craig Evan is the other one. He flew out today. So yeah, Brandon gets us we get authorized. Brandon gets the appropriations, the money, and then turns it over to the team, and then I lead us through the 6-step core planning process for a feasibility study. So the top boxes you see, the 6 blue boxes there on top, are the 6 steps over the three. Well, these are up until December. So what we're working on right now are the boxes on the far left in the yellow. So the team right now is just in the initial planning phase. This is the scoping phase, right? We're reaching out to CPRA, to the parish, to you guys tonight. That's the purpose for tonight. We want to hear. We're not here to talk, right? We're here to hear from you guys. What are the problems you're seeing? What are flooding problems that you're seeing in maybe in your residence or commercial areas, things like that. So we're going to take that information back and we'll start to start to formulate some alternatives. And alternatives mean solutions, right? Some measures we could potentially recommend as part of this process. So everything's kind of on the table at this point within the scope of the project. So this slide, I'm going to circle back to this slide at the end. This is really kind of the meat of why we're here. These are some example questions that we're posing to you, right? What I've just kind of mentioned. Do the problems identified and capture? So the next series of slides that I'll present are problems, opportunities, objectives, constraints. That's kind of part of the initial scoping planning exercise. We've already done this exercise, boring exercise, with CPRA and the parish. So now we're kind of going to do that tonight, right, at the maps. We're not going to sit and do it kind of interactively, but tonight we want to hear that kind of information from you guys. So what are some problems you're seeing? What are these problems related to flooding in the parish, right? So we're in Kentwood tonight, but if you live in another area away from Kentwood, we want to hear that too, right? Anywhere within the parish or even within the watershed. What is the source of that flooding? Is it Tangipahoa River? Is it a tributary to the river? Is it heavy rainfall? If you know the source of that and what's causing those damages, that would be good for us to know. And how often is it flooding? Are there measures or alternative strategies that could address the problems more effectively, right? Or is there any measures already in place that you know of, and maybe they're just not functioning properly? And are there constraints that we should be considering? So constraints is a very loose term, so I'll kind of put some terminology to that here in the next couple slides. But and besides kind of what you're seeing in your backyard, are you aware of any reports or data that might be useful that we can get our hands on and throw into our studies while we're modeling them or writing this initial part of the report? So I'll circle back to this. So kind of when I'm going through these slides, think in your mind of some things that that might trigger in these next couple of slides that are addressing these series of questions. So again, I'm not going to tell you guys anything that's not up here, right? This is just kind of a standard slide that we have in presentations, right? Obviously, this is Tangipahoa Parish. That's our full study area. We're looking parish-wide, right? So I'm not going to go through the list here. We know that Tangipahoa River is the major waterway, right? Flowing north to south, basically right through the middle, yeah? It's part of the Louisiana Scenic Louisiana Scenic Designation, right? Portions of it are. It sounds like the main economic drivers in the parish are mainly agriculture, right? Strawberries, right? Ponchatoula is the...
That's not my problem, but I'm sure they
Oh.
have some that has some complaints.
Yeah. Oh, well, no, I'm just kind of identifying some just general information about the parish, right? So not problems yet.
The river itself.
Yeah. We're just looking like parish-wide. The good things about it, right? What are you known for? What are what are the main economic, the jobs, so distributions, right? Distributions. Hold on, I just got to restart notice. Hold on. Don't want that to happen right now. Okay, so there's a lot of distribution because of where you're located, north of the metropolitan area of New Orleans, two major interstates, down south, right? Further south than here, but I-12 and I-55 intersect, so it sounds like a lot of distribution centers are popping up. So those kind of things, if you know about development that's in the future, right? Even if it's 5, 10, 15 years out, our planning study actually foresees 50 years out. So if you know of any developments, whether it's subdivision, Amazon warehouse, something like that, a major warehouse, we'd like to know about that. We have here, and I'll go in this in a minute, but the critical hurricane evacuation routes are, of course, the I-12 and I-55 for the New Orleans metro area. I think as well for the lower part of the parish is also like 455 and 190 as well. So if you have evacuation routes up in this area, we'd like to kind of know about them as well. So some of the problems, and these are general problems, right? These aren't necessarily getting down into specific flooding along Brushy Creek, right? These are more of what the overall project is going to look at, right? So we are obviously going to address the fact that the problem is flood damages from hurricanes, storms, riverine flooding, as well as heavy rainfall flooding, right? Seems like you guys got it all down here. Got it all. That type of flooding obviously is flooding residential and commercial, right? And I'll kind of go into some of the critical infrastructure here in a minute. And of course, all of those flood damages poses a life safety risk, right? Impacts to critical infrastructure. We have a map here I'll show you that's, hospitals, schools, nursing homes, things like that, government facilities. And then this is saying, again, the evacuation routes right here, I-55, I-12, Highway 190, and Louisiana State Highway 445. There's also some historically significant structures, so flooding causes an increased risk to those. And flooding will also cause environmental degradation, so we'll include that as a problem in the study, as well as sea level rise, subsidence. And then it looks like there is, development occurring on the lower portion of the parish. So that's something to consider as well. That's a problem. So opportunities is just very briefly, An opportunity can be used in feasibility studies for if it is incidental to flood risk management, right? So our scope for this project is strictly flood risk management, right? We're addressing the problems caused by flooding. So if an opportunity could be, I don't know, like a recreation component, right? We can perhaps include that as one of the measures in the study if and only if it's incidental to those flood risk measures. So we have goals, we have objectives. Some of the objectives, this is kind of narrowing it down a little bit, is to reduce the risk to public health and life safety from flooding, first and foremost, right? Life safety. Reduce the economic loss from flood damages to structures and the critical infrastructure. And then it's my understanding that I-22 or I-12 was flooded right during Ida. So obviously we want to reduce the flooding risk to the major transportation corridors, not just locally, but nationally. Increase community resilience to flooding and increase resilience of riparian habitats. So again, this is kind of a brief, I don't really want to spend too much time on this slide, but as part of the planning study, we have to hear about all of the constraints. So constraints it's a very vague term. There's study constraints, there's funding constraints, there's all kinds of constraints, but we want to hear from you guys, like potential constraints that you know about, maybe, around the Kentwood area or wherever you're at in the parish. So some of those could be threatened endangered species, right? We don't want to pose a recommendation that may impact a threatened endangered species, right? Plants or animals, fish, wildlife. If you know of any hazardous, toxic, or radioactive waste sites within the parish, we'd like to know about those. And again, we're doing our own inventories too, right? But you guys know, you live here, right? You see this stuff. So those are kind of examples of constraints. So keep in your mind, if you think of some constraints, problems, opportunities, objectives, constraints. So our first, to kick off kind of some alternatives that we will begin to start to formulate. First and foremost, we will consider the no action alternative. What if CPRA, what if Tangipahoa Parish doesn't do anything? What would happen with the flooding within the parish, right? So we consider that. We look at the future without a project. We assume that the flood risk will continue to increase, right? We'll continue to have sea level rise, we'll continue to have subsidence, the rainfall, riverine, bank topping. We'll also assume that increased storm damage, both intensity and frequency. And we can also probably assume that the development that is occurring will also continue or maybe or grow greater, right, exponentially. So the next couple slides are just showing you some of our initial data gathering that we've already done, right? So we have several subject matter experts here. We have environmental, hydraulic, engineering, economics, and civil here. And some of these next slides, you'll see kind of the initial information that they have gathered. So here's a land cover, right? So what this is showing to no great detail is red is development, right? So if you're looking at these different colors, the red is the development, the yellow and the green is more like pasture and forested areas. So at this level for these next couple slides, it's not really for you to show detail at, but it's just showing you that this is what we are looking at. So whenever we go to develop project measures, we can zoom into these areas and really look at what we're proposing not to impact certain land covers, perhaps. So the map of the parish, it's hard to see from where you're sitting, but all those little icons are related to critical infrastructure. That's very important, right? I know that down near Hammond during Isaac, I believe, and in 2016, that the road leading to the airport was flooded, right? Some people couldn't get to the hospitals, right? So we need to know where that critical infrastructure is, not only if it's flooding, but access to those areas, right? So this is just showing you our initial inventory of where the critical structure is located, infrastructure is located parish-wide. The box to the right of it is just a zoomed-in box from the parish website showing the evacuation rate for the the evacuation route for the greater New Orleans area, and of course for the lower part of the parish as well. So that's the intersection of 55 and 12. So we, of course, are looking at the FEMA flood zones. Not much more to say about this other than, these different colorations show different floodplains throughout the parish. Again, this is just initial information that we are gathering right now. So it's important for us to know the history of what has flooded in the past, right, parish-wide. So we can gather that data by looking at past FEMA flood claims. And what this is showing is just a random sampling of some FEMA flood claims, most likely severe repetitive loss claims. It says number of repetitive loss claims. I probably shouldn't say severe because I'm not quite sure in terms of FEMA technology or terminology, but so of some of the communities parish-wide, it's showing the second column, you probably can't read it, the number of repetitive loss claims per municipality, and then on the right, the dollar amount is the total payments, right? And that time frame at the bottom there is from 1978 to 2018. There may be more recent data that we could probably get from FEMA, and we will get from FEMA, but during our initial scoping, we were just really kind of like pausing at what we could gather pretty readily available, and 2018 was kind of the end date. But we will continue to kind of gather more updated information for that. So that's just a kind of an overview of some of the initial data that we've been gathering. So like I said, we will begin to develop measures, right? So those, for most core planning studies on the left side there, underneath the measure column, they're kind of broken out into these four things. So we have structural, and again, these are examples. These examples listed on the right side of this column may or may not apply to this study, right? But we don't know that yet because we're just in the initial scoping. So, but we will probably identify a structural measure, perhaps, maybe. If we do, it may be a levee, a flood wall, a detention basin, something that is constructed, right? Non-structural would be more of elevation of a home, or dry flood proofing of home, wet flood proofing, things like that. There's also more and more common that the Corps is trying to implement through their recent planning studies is nature-based solutions. So engineering with nature here. So perhaps flooding impacts could be resolved by a wetland creation or a marsh creation, something like that. And then, of course, you can have a combination of any of these, right? It's just not having structural, not having just non-structural. You could have a combination of these, or you may not. We don't know yet. But these are just some examples of what has been done in the past for studies. So again, circling back to the input we need from you guys tonight or in the future, the next slide will have 3 different opportunities that you can tell us in the future at any point. Like Brandon said, this is a 3-year study. We'd like it sooner than later. But if you think of something in the next week, month, 2 months, 3 months, write us. We have an email. We have a website. We also have a dedicated email address just for this study. So we'd like to hear from you. So we've done enough talking, so we can break out and go back to the maps. We've already got some really good information tonight from folks that showed up earlier. So yeah, I think with that, I'll conclude.
Thank you very much, Katie, and thank you everyone else for being here tonight, joining us in person or by Facebook Live. As Katie said, we have the website. We also have a physical address where you can mail any questions or comments, or an email address as well with the Army Corps of Engineers. So again, thank you for being here.
Presentation be visible on the website?
Yes, well actually it's on our Facebook page, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Facebook page for New Orleans District.